Hello, and welcome to another edition of Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. We have another incredible show planned for today. George Vecsey, former New York Times sports columnist, news reporter, and prolific author, will be joining us for Super Bowl Sunday. He'll share his thoughts about the Super Bowl. We'll talk about his family, a long career, long line of journalists in his family. We'll talk about the books he's written. We'll also talk about his connection to India. Our host is Sri Srinivasan, Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors. We're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. Please like, please comment, please share, please tag your friends. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the Vice President of Events and Communications at Digimentors and Executive Producer of the New York Times Read Along. Thank you to everyone for joining us. We have a number of people already saying hi. Hello from snowy Philadelphia. Laura Silverman, Doug Levy from California, up early. It's about 5:30 in the morning out there. Jonathan Borstein checking in from the East Village. And we have Rajni Kotecha joining us from Toronto. Patricia Freudenberg. Hey, Patricia, how you doing? Always great to see you. And Amber Coleman Mortley. Amber, always good. Thank you for joining us. Linda Lawrence. And our friend Ron Thomas joining from, that was Ron Thomas joining from Dubai. And Pradnya Haldapur joining from close by here in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm based in Springfield, Virginia, although I'm originally from New York, not too far from Ardsley, where Francesca is joining us from. Hey, Francesca. And Miriam is joining us as well from Hell's Kitchen. As I mentioned earlier, our guest is George Vecsey. He is a former New York Times sports columnist, and as you can see, I'm wearing my Yankee jersey because George is a Mets fan, so I had to balance that out just a little bit. I grew up in New York reading the paper, getting it in the blue bag every morning, and grew up reading George's columns and reporting. So this is an absolute thrill for me to have George on the show. So with that, I'm going to bring on Sri Srinivasan. Sri, welcome back from Puerto Rico. You're back in the Upper West Side, right?
I am. You can see the Hudson River behind me. After being on the beach for 3 months, I am delighted of sorts to be back in New York.
Sri, so welcome back. This is what you're coming back to. This is a little clip I took this morning when I went out to get the paper. It's not as much as New York got last week, but it's just a little snow for you.
Well, I like seeing that video. Yeah. I don't know why we came back, but we're here. And thank you, Neil, for doing the extra work of not just being executive producer, but also manning our New York Times camera, because I couldn't get the print paper on Sundays in San Juan. So we were relying on your delivery of the paper up, down in outside DC.
My wife thanks you for coming back to get the dining room table back.
and Rupa now knows that I have taken over the living room here. Mary Jane's watching from Long Island. Our good friend Diane is watching from Margate, New Jersey, also originally from New York City. And we have so much to talk about today. I am so thrilled that we have with us George Vecsey. Susan's watching from Stuytown, New York. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you for this amazing community we've built in 5+ years of doing this. Let's give a shout out to our production team. Neil's our executive producer, and there are 4 other folks who help him. Paula Kiger at Big Green Pen, Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve, Carla Baranauckas at Kabara, Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks. Carla is a former New York Times copy editor and member of the Continuous News Desk. And Neil is at Neil Parekh. Everyone, please follow him. Neil and I work together, not just on this, but on a company called Digimentors, which he mentioned before. We do virtual and hybrid events, and we would love to talk to you. If you have a conference, a summit, a webinar, a talk show, anything that you'd like, you see how we produce things at a different quality level than you might be used to when you're just doing Zoom calls. So if you'd like to talk to us about this, please email Neil@digimentors.group, or me, Sri@digimentors.group, or Sri@sri.net. We also want to thank our sponsors. MuckRack makes this possible. Our friends Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider and others there. MuckRack does so much good work for both journalists as well as PR folks and anyone in the communications industry. Check out their MuckRack Daily, and also the free social media fundamentals course that they and I put together. More than 4,000 people have taken that course, and would love for you to take that as well. You can find it all at MuckRack. So thank you, the folks at MuckRack. If you'd like to be a sponsor, you can check again. Our emails are here, and we'd love to work with you on getting more sponsorship so we can continue to produce this show, which we've been doing now for 5 months. 5 years, sorry, 5 months.
We're in our 6th year, in fact.
Yeah.
You started 5 years ago last October, and I joined about 3 years after that. We have a new viewer, at least new to me, Bruna De Silvia, watching from Ontario as well. And then, of course, my mom watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. Hi, Mom. Thank you for joining us as always. Elizabeth Jacobs, Naomi Service from the Upper West Side, not far from you. Our good friend Sunny Slaughter from the DMV, not the Department of Motor Vehicles, DC, Maryland, Virginia.
That's one of the things I learned that from talking to Sunny, that the DMV is a term you all use down there, but we are not familiar with it as much.
Yeah. And Sunny, of course, was our guest on an incredible show we did focusing on the 1619 project almost a year and a half ago now. I can't believe it was that long ago. But Sunny, thank you.
And she was also a guest with us, along with Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate, as we talked the week after the killing of George Floyd. And it was a really moving experience to talk to her.
And several times on your COVID show as well. And then Ted Coltman is joining us from Washington, D.C. So we have several people from this part of the country, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. And Nikhil is joining us as well. So
I just want to say that in our future, we have at least one more Washington Post read-along.
Yes.
We'll take a break from the New York Times and read the Washington Post with a Washington Post columnist. So Neil controls when things are announced and the sequencing of it and whether it's a surprise or not. But at least the fact that we will be doing a Washington Post read-along with a senior Washington Postonian, watch for that.
And of course, we call it the WAPO read-along. Yes. We wouldn't want to put the New York Times across their space. But with that, why don't we take a look at the paper, Sri? Let's see what's in store for today.
Yes, so much going on. Let's take a look very quickly. This is the New York Times Camera. We'll read the front page with George in just a few minutes. Here, there's a very important graphic here that you can see. U.S. coronavirus cases are down, but eclipse spring and summer peaks. So even though things are better, they're still worse than they were last spring and last summer. So that's important to keep in mind. So while you're seeing a lot of green, it's still problematic. Let's look at this cover. Neil, I know you've been promoting this on social media. America's mothers are in crisis. Is anyone listening to them? This is a special section that the individual stories many of you would have seen online. A lot of attention has been given to those stories, but a whole section just on what's happening with mothers.
Absolutely, and that's another great job by the print hub at the New York Times, and Mike Connors, who runs the printing plant for the New York Times, gave a nice shout out. I know he was excited to have George on the show. And he also liked my choice of outfit. So
another Yankee fan. And Mike hosted us for a New York Times read along live from the printing plant in Queens. And we'd love to go back out there when the things are possible to do that. So hi, Mike, and welcome. And Mike is, I believe, a fourth generation New York Times employee.
Yeah.
And Arlene's in the house. Hi, Arlene, welcome. Sunday review cover is the first step is admitting you have a problem. Why my time working on a North Dakota oil patch taught me about America's fossil fuel addiction and how to overcome it. And again, very dramatic use of art. That's one of the things we'll talk to George about, is how the paper has changed over his amazing career at the New York Times. Please stay tuned. George Vecsey is going to be with us, a legendary New York Times journalist. Sunday Styles covers Mushrooms Are Magic. Watching them transform from trash to fleshy sculptural food is a comfort. They sell kits where you can grow your own mushrooms. And we've done that, and that's kind of fun. Memories of a Life on Ice. And this is 4 decades ago, photo captured a girl's love for skating, a feeling that has endured. In fact, why don't we bring George on now and see have him talk to us through some of these covers as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. George, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Nice. Always nice to be here.
George, I'm going to talk to you about so many aspects of your work and your life and everything else, but what do you know about this photograph and this story?
Well, I was taken by it. It's an arresting photo by itself, of course, and it goes back X years. And when I looked at the credit line at the bottom, it's by a friend of mine who didn't live long enough to really enjoy all the stuff that he put there. Tyrone
Dukes,
like my age, Tyrone Dukes, and he was wandering through Rockefeller Center by the rink, which I know very well because my dad worked at the AP right above it, and it was the view. And Tyrone was wandering by, and he saw this tyke looking like a gold medal Olympian, and he asked if he could take pictures, and he did. And that beautiful picture wound up being a story about her and why she was skating so well at the age of 8. Tyrone had been in the military, in the Air Force in Vietnam, and came back and died, I think, when he was around 40. We always thought it was from Agent Orange. I mean, I didn't know, but that's what people thought. And I'm so happy to see him, 40 years later, popping up in the paper. He was in the paper the other day, a couple of weeks ago, months ago, on a photo he took of Aretha Franklin. I think she was uptown, maybe at the Apollo or somewhere, and he happened to go, and it was just a wonderful photo of her. So to see Tyrone living on in his photo made me very happy. The story was good too, and corrupt about somebody, her life going on and being a teacher and skater. But the photos are in, and we have this great photo morgue, and my friend Jeff Roth works there, and he can find anything that ever appeared in the paper. I can attest to that. So it's this great institution going digital, able to find things.
And this original photo was in 1975.
75.
Is in 2020.
Yeah.
So thank you, George, for sharing that, and it's great to know about that connection. Here's the Arts and Leisure cover, Masters of Rock, Catharsis, and More, with Foo Fighters. Dave Grohl built a band for all seasons. So nice to see that. One thing I just learned is that Creedence Clearwater Revival, CCR, which sold 30 million albums and had 9 top 10 hits, was only together for 4 years back in the 70s. That seems such a short time for the influence that they've had. They also played a role in this year's elections. As you know, Donald Trump kept playing Fortunate Son without understanding what that song was about. Fortunate Son is about rich and influential people getting out of the Vietnam War, but he kept playing it because he didn't understand what that song was about. Here is The Many Lives of Stephen Yuen, which is a star of The Walking Dead, and he has a new film called Minari.
Shri, I do have to jump in. If you're talking about songs that Donald Trump is playing, or was playing, YMCA was also up there. He clearly didn't know what that song was about.
All right, let's keep going. This is the business section, I believe, but for some reason I don't see the word business here. George was able to spot the idea that this was the business section right away, but I can't quite tell that this is the business section. But here is how the U.S. lost to hackers. Very dramatic cover. For a few decades, America excelled at cyber warfare. Then it became a victim of its own hubris, working anything but 9 to 5. And a Super Bowl ad has remade Dolly Parton's feminist anthem into an ode to hustle culture. And speaking of country music, we should mention that George co-wrote the book Coal Miner's Daughter with the great Loretta Lynn, and that became an amazing movie that was nominated for Best Picture and won Sissy Spacek an Oscar for Best Actress. It was nominated also for Best Adapted Screenplay. George, you're a man of many, many talents.
Thank you. The poster is right behind me. The Italian poster for Coal Miner's Daughter. In Italian, in Italy they called it La Ragazza di Nashville, and it explains it all. But I imagine seeing a poster that size with your name in it. Loretta did very well by me.
That's great. What do you make of the Dolly Parton moment?
The world can't fuss enough about her. She is one of the greats, not only as a songwriter, which I admire very much, and as a singer, performer, but also her generosity, her breadth of spirit. She is truly one of a kind. I have great love and admiration for her. Never met her, but I've followed her work, and some of her songs are just classics.
Since we have the poster behind you, you should tell us how you came to be in touch with Loretta Lynn and how that book came about.
I was working in Appalachia for the great Gene Roberts and Dave Jones on the national desk. They recruited me from sports. And I covered a coal mine disaster on the next to last day of 1970. Mine blew up and I was there. And I heard later that Loretta Lynn had come off the road with her band to play a benefit performance in Freedom Hall in Louisville, and money for the families. And I heard about it, and I said, well, this is a great way to get to write about her. She had just bought her own town in Tennessee. So I made contacts, and it took a while, but that fall when she won the Entertainer of the Year award, I interviewed her that morning. She was on with Frank McGee at some ungodly hour in the morning, and then I interviewed her in her hotel room. And from there, friendship grew, and I wound up writing her book.
That must have been an amazing experience.
It was. I mean, to be taken into that world, that family. She and her husband, Mooney or Doolittle, they were really great to me, generous, no secrets. It was sort of a tumultuous marriage, and I asked Mooney about it one time in front of Loretta. I said, "Now look, people know all about you guys, and they hear stories." And Mooney said, "Hell's bells! If it's true, write it." And we did, and he's a star of the book. Plus, for a short country guy, he got played by Tommy Lee Jones in the movie, so he elevated about 8 inches right away, and looks. But good for Mooney.
Well, thank you. And with so many stories to talk to you about, I can't wait to ask you about your writing with Martina Navratilova, her famous book and memoir. So we'll talk to you about that as well. Here is At Home, the At Home section. We're gathering the household for game day. We know today's Super Bowl Sunday. Who do you got? Who do you have, as they say, for today's game?
Who's that?
No, like George, who are you picking for the game? What is your
well, I'll say this, that my daughter and her partner have love Patrick Mahomes. They watch him like their other kid brother or something. And I feel obliged to follow them to follow him the same way. Not crazy about Brady, but that's a side issue. Basically, Mahomes is such a charismatic and great quarterback that I'll go with that. All
right, Laura's tuning in and comments about the football joke that you just made. So hello to Laura Vecsey. You want to say hi, George?
Laura, Diane, good morning.
Great to have you with us. We should point out we have a big international audience. They may not all follow the Super Bowl or be interested in it, but we'll say this is an unusual Super Bowl because they have, I think, one of the greatest talents of all time playing one of the greatest young talents of all time in Mahomes versus Brady. And so I encourage those of you who may not watch for the game just to watch. I'm not a Tom Brady fan, but I'm a fan of what he's been able to achieve. George, I'm a long-suffering Jets fan from the days, from the 1980s. So obviously I've suffered from because of Tom Brady, but you've got to admire what he's doing at the age of 43.
No, absolutely. I mean, we've seen quarterbacks phase out at different, in the mid-30s or whatever, or be phased out, and he's managed to go on and even to prove it. I mean, imagine being in the Super Bowl at 43 after leaving the team where he'd had so much success. It really is an amazing story, factoring out whatever people think of his persona or politics or perceived politics. All of that's a side issue at this moment.
And George, I have your blog post up for this week, and this pull quote that coming from a longtime sports columnist, you're just not a fan of football. That you've covered some Super Bowls, and you're talking about the build-up, but you do actually have an interest in this week's show, in the game rather. Amanda Gorman,
right,
in particular, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that she was going to be reading a new poem of hers, I got very excited because she burst into our brain on the inauguration day. Such a brilliant young lady, able to write and perform like that in that kind of setting. And so the fact that she's going to be back, I want to see her outfit. I want to hear her words. I just want to take some energy from her. And then who knows, maybe there's a soccer game on and I can switch after her poem.
That's
the real football.
Yeah, real football. You covered 8 World Cups and you wrote a book about it. Tell us about that, please.
I did indeed. I played soccer in high school very badly. I'm sure a couple of my old teammates might be out there watching, and they will talk about how they had to cover up for my mistakes at defensive back or fullback. And I always had a feel for the sport. When I got to the Times and was made a sports columnist, I had a certain amount of freedom and I asked Arthur Gelb and Joe Vecchione, and they said, why don't you go to the World Cup in Spain this summer of '82? So I did, and that was my first one, and I just fell in love with the event. Teams from all over the world playing in Spain. It was a great time, and ever after that, I went to the next 8. Haven't been to the last 2 since I retired, but it was just a lifetime of enjoyment in those 8 World Cups. Steve, greetings.
And can you talk a little bit about the journey soccer has had in this country, going from not as popular, but as a youth sport, especially super popular, and then compared to the professional popularity?
Yeah, it was interesting because I was operating out of curiosity about the sport, but also a love of it, knowing how hard it is. And I would be with friends of mine, my age, my generation, who hated soccer. They hated the idea of it. A friend of mine whose name will not be noted would always tease me about 0-0. That was the classic soccer score. 0-0, is it, Vecsey? And I said, yeah, well, sometimes it is. But I felt that they were not even watching what was happening in front of them. Somebody making a great run, tossing a pass sideways, or making a great shot and missing by a few inches. And nothing happened. He missed. And I said, no, you didn't get the point. You scared the daylights out of the goalkeeper. And it took this much athleticism to get there. That's what you're watching. But it took a long time. So forget about my generation. I mean, there were a few people. Paul Gardner, the Johnny Appleseed of soccer, writing in the Times and on TV, and people talking about it. But I kept saying, no, there's critical mass happening here. The United States finally made the World Cup in 1990, and it was able to compete a little bit better, gave Italy a hard game. And I kept saying, at some point, the United States is going to produce players. I feel a little bit vindicated now because there are so many great young American players on the best teams in Europe, playing with Real or Dortmund and moving on to Chelsea and so on. So many of them in all the great countries in the world. It's finally happened that the young people who grew up and played it with their dads and their brothers and blah, 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 are now going over to Europe at 14, 16, 18. And it is actually happening. Americans are playing at the top stage.
That's great to know. Let's see here. Sorry, we have a question here from Pavan Dhingra, who's a former guest on the show, was written a very important book about college and higher education. Says, would like to know your take on the MLS. How can it grow in popularity? That's Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I would say that the people that have run MLS from the beginning right through to today have done a great job. It's so many teams, new teams coming in. Another team in St. Louis in 2 years. Great hotbed of soccer. So it is firmly making a base here. Good fans, people coming, new stadiums. But can it really catch up to the level of soccer in Europe, for example, and Latin America producing them? I think that's a tough one because the money is there. I mean, today there's a Liverpool, Man City match on this morning. That's the real stuff, and it's going to be very hard for MLS to match that because the money that's in it for the great players. We see them when they're 33 and their wives and their girlfriends want to live in the United States for a year. But until that happens, they're going to play over there.
I know you know Sunil Gulati well, who's played such an important role in the development of U.S. soccer.
So Sunil and Paul Gardner taught me watching in the bleachers at this lovely little soccer stadium up at Columbia. And back in the early 80s, I would stand there in the top seat with them, and they would just tell me what I was seeing on a pretty good college level game. And Sunil, when the MLS came along and with the National Soccer Federation, he did a great job for a long time because as somebody who knows the economics, he understood how to get it going, how to build a national team. So I give my hats off to Sunil wherever he is right now.
And Sunil and America were robbed of getting the World Cup again because of all the shenanigans that went on at FIFA.
No, It was such a bad deal where the delegates, people who voted in those, FIFA, I discovered that what I thought was this amiable little group of people who put on World Cups every 4 years, it was the most corrupt. It made the Olympics and it made our sports look like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. That the corruption in there, people would go to vote for the next host, for example. And when they came in, the delegates, they'd be handed a packet of American $100 bills, and then they would vote exactly as they were told. That's how Russia and Qatar got the two together. It was a package deal. The Russians knew how to grease. The people from Qatar obviously knew how to grease. And those two, not that it shouldn't be spread around. It should. And the United States is getting a World Cup coming up. But it was so dishonest, and I didn't believe it. But some people, Andrew Jennings over in the UK, a good muckraker, they were on top of it. And FIFA has been since then exposed as truly corrupt.
Yeah, they have. Patricia says, "Wow, what awesome perspective! Thanks for sharing." And Bruce from Dundas here. George, how about a few words about the Islanders teams you covered?
I know that guy. He's my Canadian pal. He writes into me all the time on email and comments on my website. Well, he's a Canadian. He's up in near Hamilton, and I can tell you that was a highlight. One of the best postseason playoff series I've ever seen, were when the Islanders were winning Stanley Cups, and I was just discovering hockey early in the 80s, going around with them to places like Quebec City and Edmonton, where the Oilers were, and Vancouver. It was just and to get the feel of hockey as a Canadian sport, to be in those places on a Stanley Cup night and hear Canada played and fans being polite to the American anthem. It was just and the players, the ethic of that sport, how hard they played, wonderful suspense game after game. Loved it. I consider the Islanders to be the best team I ever covered for personalities and for producing. Even more than some of the Yankee teams I covered or the periodic Met teams or whatever. I just think the Islanders for those years were the best team I've ever covered.
Wow, that's saying something. I just want to welcome the followers of Richard Deitch, the terrific journalist, sports columnist, and writer for The Athletic, who I've known for more than 25 years. He just tweeted about this show, and so lots of new people have joined us. Thank you for joining us as we talk to George Vecsey about his career and his work as a sports writer, but also so much more, and the author of 30 books, including author and co-author of 30 books, including Martina Navratilova's memoirs, Coal Miner's Daughter, and so much more. Big book about the World Cup. And speaking of soccer, we'll take one more soccer question. Laura says, how has the U.S. Women's World Cup win affected the sport's popularity?
Oh, not as much as it should. The women's team has been a powerhouse since I started following, since they got into the Olympics in 1996 and started winning World Cups. It's such a great event, and that too, the women's World Cup team was so many charismatic players, good at what they did, great personalities. Michelle Akers, I still think of her as being the greatest female player I've ever seen. Like Big Bird on speed. She could track anybody down, take the ball away from them, and a gentle soul off the field. But to watch her play when she was at her best. But so many others who have come along over the years, and today's team packed full of. Some of these great players are going to have trouble making the Olympic team because they're a year too old or just getting crowded out by young talent. But the women. Now, I have my male friends who love world football, world soccer. And they say, but the women's sport, they don't have the power, they don't have the speed to watch that. I say it really doesn't matter. First of all, the women are, as maybe no surprise, great teammates. They play a great team game. I could see that right from the beginning. And just the personalities, but also the skill within their physical ability, which of course is great, that it's so much fun to watch that I still think some of those games that I saw in 96, particularly at the Olympics in Atlanta, which had so many female teams in it, women's teams in other sports. But that team was just wonderful. Mia Hamm and, Julie Foudy, just everybody.
I do want to say that I love watching women's soccer. I think we only watch it in our family when the big tournaments come around. But we were in Italy and we tried to watch the women's finals live, and you won't believe the kind of dismissive tone from a lot of the Italian bar owners that we talked to. Are you going to be showing the game? When is it? All of that. They just were not interested, and that's kind of that's the role of sexism in sports.
I've heard that before, and I guess I'm not surprised. You try and get somebody to turn on. I would go in, even during the World Cup, I would go into Foley's, the great baseball pub, and Sean, of course, would put it up on some, but you'd have it on one, and then some baseball game or something else would be on another. It hasn't, and in Europe, Europe and Latin America, the stigma of female athletes, we're so far past that in this country, thank goodness. But the stigma to them about what it implied about them and what's wrong with them, why are they playing sports? It's just another world, and I think even Europe is finally catching up now. That the great English teams, with all the heinous things that are yelled from the stands at athletes of color and probably at women also, but they are starting to understand, and those great teams are starting to pay to bring in the best female players. A lot of the American women have now moved over to play in their league because there's more money and a better structure for it.
Speaking of women athletes, you co-wrote Martina, the book by Martina Navratilova. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I was a big fan of hers when she was playing in the 80s and early 90s. Please talk about her a little bit.
Yeah, Martina is a great athlete. Comes by it naturally. Her mother is very athletic also, so she just had it as a kid. They in the Soviet bloc, they would measure, probably even more scientifically than we were at that time. They were measuring people's reactions, their muscle length, and what they were going to grow up to be. And they told her that she would be a great athlete in ice hockey. So she was doing both, ice hockey and tennis, but tennis was more in her family. And so she insisted and took lessons. She would take a train into Prague. They lived in a distant suburb, and she would take the train and make herself. But she was such a great athlete and so smart. I mean, how many people get extremely high intelligence and extremely great athletic ability in the same package, to say nothing of her drive, her personality? So she is just the perfect package for any athlete. And for her to make it, I got to meet her. In fact, Loretta Lynn's book was the reason that her people asked me to talk about writing the book with her. And it was so easy to work with. I mean, she is so smart, has a great memory. Her only problem is the tear gates, that anytime she'd talk about something personal, she'd talk about her grandmother who fussed over her. And she's, I can't talk about her today because I've got a match later, but I can talk about it tomorrow because I know I'm going to cry. And that's who she is, all heart, brain, muscles. I just love being around her.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I also know she's quite active in at least talking about politics, and she was very active in progressive causes.
Yeah, she when something pops up, I'm often curious to see if somebody will get to Martina and she'll make a comment about it, and she does. Of course, Megan Rapinoe these days is a wonderful successor to her, still playing, still in her career. And we have been lucky to have these women with so much guts and so much brains to speak their mind about, not just things that affect women, but things that affect the whole world.
Wayne Camadoy is watching. Here's this. Laura says Martina owns Twitter, and one Martina retweeted something I wrote. I thought that was one of the great highlights of my life.
She's out there. She's out there watching.
Sure.
Hey, there's my man Wayne.
Yes,
Wayne's the genius, man. He's come up with some of the great artwork for the sports department and other parts of the paper.
And great designer at the New York Times, and says George was a soccer expert before everyone was a soccer expert. Glad to have worked with George in my 20 years in the sports department. And he says the HBO documentary on Maradona, mostly his time in Italy, is amazing.
Mm-hmm. I guess they interviewed me for that. Yeah. I was sent over by the Times Magazine section to do a piece when the World Cup was coming to the United States, or they were the defending champions, and he was playing in Napoli, which is a city unto itself, like no other place in the world. And he was very hard to pin down, and I couldn't get an interview. I had the club couldn't help me, of course. They were nice to me. They couldn't help me, so I got a phone number for him. And while I was still in the States, and I called the number I had for his home, and I started to speak. Since it was Italy, I started to speak in my little bit of Italian, and the guy immediately switched to Spanish. And I said, okay, well, I have a little bit of Spanish too. So I switched, and I made my point that I was a reporter. The New York Times was coming over anyway, wanted to interview Diego Armando Maradona. And the guy said he'd give the message to him, blah, blah, blah. I got there to Italy, went to a match they played where he helped and scored a couple of goals for the Napoli team. And afterward, they bring him into the press center, and he gives an interview in Italian, of course. And as soon as I heard his voice, I said, SOB, that's the guy that blew me off on the phone.
And I didn't realize that Maradona spoke Italian that well as well.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because a lot of he's Italian, Argentine, right? So a lot of Argentine.
First of all, he's from part of the world where the languages come, and by being they pick it up quickly. It's amazing. I mean, it's amazing how 2, 3, 4 languages that these guys speak just in going from city to city.
Yeah. We have lots more questions. Arlene asks, she's a sports writer herself. How much and what do you miss about writing a sports column for the Times?
I miss it. I miss it the way it was, the way I had it, which is we had several sports columnists writing at once, and you could sort of pick and choose. And also we were on a regular schedule. So it was your day to write. You could come up with, you could go hard, you could go soft, you could, whatever you thought was coming along. there was so much creativity to it that I really felt I had a great venue for writing about sports in the broadest sense. I'm very pleased to see the Times has recently appointed Kurt Streeter to write a column, and Kurt gets it. He's got a column in a Sunday paper in Today talking about Antonio Brown, the well-traveled guy who's had legal problems with women, and should he be still playing? Is this the kind of image the National Football League wants? Kurt gets it on matters like gender, race, pay, and I'm really enjoying seeing what he's doing.
I was just trying to show everyone the snow. I don't think the camera's capturing it well, but it's snowing here in New York. You can barely see out the window, and you can see a little bit of snow coming in. Neil showed us earlier shots of snow down in DC. Folks, if you're just joining us, this is the Sunday New York Times read along, where we read the Sunday New York Times. We've been doing this, reading it out loud on Facebook and other social media platforms for more than 5 years. And we have an epic show today with the great George Vecsey, columnist, writer, author of more than 30 books. And we will be talking to him about various aspects of his career. Stay tuned to hear about all the amazing things he's been able to do, including his love for India and his connection there. But we do want to get to the front page of the New York Times and talk a little bit about it. And as I read, George, feel free to jump in at any point, any stories you would like to talk about or add any points here. As jobs dry up, tenants pack in and fall behind. A housing emergency, affordable rentals, rare, eviction bans give only fleeting aid. And this, most people have learned who have been with us that the New York Times, the lead story is here. How do you think that a story like that plays when on a weekend they sometimes do a much bigger layout and display of a story like that?
Well, first of all, I love the map front and center on the front page, the color map, which tells it the New York Times has, in my time there, has gone to color. I can remember, if I can tell the story for a minute, sitting at a lunch of the sports department, and Arthur Sulzberger, the recent publisher, came down to join us. And I got in a conversation with him. I said, why are we toying with starting to have color in the paper? What's wrong with the good old gray, black and white New York Times? And he looked at me like I was a fool. And he said nicely, we live in color, we dream in color, life is in color. Why not New York Times in color? And of course, when you look at this map, how they're able to tell a story just from, reds and greens and in between, it's proving that he was right to invest in it. And, as usual, I knew nothing.
Let's point out what this is showing here is that this is the greens that you see are the drop in the cases from the winter peak, but comparing it to the summer and spring peaks of last year, you can see that we're still doing worse. So we're doing better than we were a couple of weeks ago, but we're still doing worse than we were last year. And I know you're waiting for the vaccine, George.
Well, I'm waiting here in Port Washington. As Billy Joel might say, Nassau County has a huge, terrible rate for infections. I suspect it's from all the nice family gatherings over the holidays and whatever, and can't get anything. I go on every morning, and I get a thing that says, nothing within 50 miles for one pharmacy, nothing within 50 miles. And then I go on to another one in New York State, and it says, yeah, we got plenty of them in Potsdam and Plattsburgh. Well, that's no disrespect to my Canadian pal, but that's basically Canada, and I'm not driving up there for a shot. So until we sort it out, yes, I'm waiting. But on the other hand, I'm waiting very comfortably at home in the house. My wife's a great cook. Our heads are busy. No problem.
That's good to know. Bronx Shelter's boss rose despite claims of abuse. City gave $274 million to nonprofit led by man accused of sexual predation. There's a story about Victor Rivera. Really sad to see that. Return of military's old tactics meets resistance in Myanmar. And we've been following that story this whole week. A new administration and a new border crisis. Thousands hoping for looser policy arrive. And already they're, giving the Biden administration lots to worry about. Flynn is back selling anger and T-shirts. And that's about Michael Flynn, who doesn't seem to go away. And then here's the Super Bowl on the front page, a Super Bowl sideshow. See the ageless man. Tampa Bay's Tom Brady, 43, is the only quarterback to start a Super Bowl after age 40. He's about to do it for the third time. He's basically played in 48% of all Super Bowls since he joined the NFL. It's a staggering stat. This is his 10th Super Bowl. There are 4 teams that have never been to the Super Bowl in 55 years, but here he is. It's an amazing story. As I said, I'm not a fan of, I'm not a Tom Brady fan, but I can certainly appreciate that he is doing something new and something special in the world of sports.
And while you're at it, be a fan of John Branch, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, and just missed on another one. One of the great reporters. I had the fortune of having a desk near him for X number of years, and listening to him interview people for some stuff he was doing on brain damage. The way he talked to people, was prepared. John's a great reporter, living out in his California now, and he can cover the Super Bowl, or he can cover a forest fire in California with the same ability. I mean, the Times has great reporters in the sports department.
Thank you. And John is terrific. So thank you for that. Linda says, I'm in Nassau County, dismal. Many people disregarding safety behavior, tragic. My father is watching. So let me just say hi to TP Srinivasan is watching, says fascinating discussion. And one of the questions we got earlier from Patricia, who would George say is his most memorable mentor? And you're welcome to drop a few names and give some shout outs right now.
Oh gosh, what a nice question that is, because nobody gets there on their own. You don't just suddenly say, I think, well, why don't I have a column in the New York Times? I'm 25. Why don't they give me a column? It doesn't just happen that way. I was lucky. I came in through, well, first of all, my parents were journalists. They met at the Long Island Press, and so I was raised in a journalism environment. I had a great mentor in high school, Mrs. Rhodes, who kind of found me on the scrap heap and got me back performing again. And then at Newsday, I had Jack Mann was the sports editor, Stan Isaac was a columnist. They took me under their wing, and then I was hired to go to the Times, and just to learn from the people I learned from. Particularly on the national desk, Gene Roberts, Dave Jones, the great copy editors they had. It was a real writer's section, the national section. So you'd actually get good editing, copy editing, people making suggestions. How about writing this over again? And just all that, Abe Rosenthal, Arthur Gelb, who were around, available, and working in the Metro staff as I did for 8 years or so. You'd run into them all the time, and I could go on and on, but there were so many people that I learned from.
That's great that you are able to pay tribute to them. Folks, we have about 40 minutes left with the great George Vecsey. Please tell us where you're watching from. Please hit share and tag a friend. They can watch now or later on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Jennifer says, my husband is so excited to hear from George. Thank you, George, for sharing your stories. Jenny and Steve in DC, and they have a nice picture of their dog there as well. So thank you, Jennifer, and welcome to this episode. Let's go into the paper a little bit. One of the former guests we had, George, was Stuart Elliott, the advertising columnist for many years, and he taught us that Tiffany has had this ad on A3 for 100 and now 104 years.
Wow.
This slot, they've had that slot here. And
oddly enough, I never noticed.
Really. And then on this day in history, the Patriots mantra, been there, done that. This is in 2005. This is this day in history. So way back when, so they're talking about sports there. And 3 must-have apps for every smartphone, a password manager, an ad blocker, and an encrypted messaging app. What is your relationship with your smartphone, George?
dicey.
Nice.
I hold on to it so I don't drop it. Sometimes I get things done. Sometimes I get ads popping up. Much more comfortable working with the laptop.
Yeah, that's why they said you should get an ad blocker there as well. One of the things that's connected to the vaccine story is that the NFL has said all 32 stadiums are at the disposal of the Biden administration to do vaccines. So I think that's exciting and important. Kentucky, an intense vaccine drive straight through the arena. So there's about sports teams helping out. And here's an odd ad for Facebook right here. The last time internet regulations were passed, a hashtag was that button you never pressed on a telephone. It's been 25 years since comprehensive internet regulations were passed. It's time for an update. So this is Facebook basically asking for regulations, but of course on its own terms. But just fascinating to see that. Can you imagine Standard Oil or one of those other companies saying, please regulate us by putting an ad in the New York Times? It's a different era now. Worst, a winter spike in cases may be over, which is good to know. And no bid tracking contract draws frustration and accusations of theft. Supreme Court partly backs churches' challenge of California's strict virus rules. You heard about this? That now the churches that were closed in California can be open with worship and singing and everything else, and it's very scary to see that. A battle to preserve 4,000 years of Iraq's past. Please, again, jump in with any stories, or if you've been to any of these places or anything, please jump in. Solace from strangers eases pandemic's grip. Group offers support in Hong Kong. Any of your memories about travel in Asia? Would love to hear about that. And also tell us about India, your travels to India.
Well, I really should drag Marianne in. She's the one who's been to India 14 times, bringing children home for adoption, but to the United States for adoption. But I did get to, about myself for a second, I did get to a number of places, fell in love with Japan and Korea, the World Cup and other things. Great times visiting there. Was only in Beijing or China once for the Olympics, and I don't think that's exactly the same thing. Did see the Great Wall, but basically I was covering the Olympics there. But my wife has been all over, there in South Asia, to India 14 times. She loved the country. She had such a feel for it. When I finally went with her after 8 or 10 trips, it was just amazing to wander around with her and see the way she was doing advocacy work for this orphanage, going and talking to farmers and judges and saying, no, it's really a good thing that's done. These children don't have a home. They'll have a home over there. They will not be used as servants, et cetera, all the fears. And she just loved the kids, and she got so much accomplished there. And she also knew the country. So we had little side trips to Agra and being taken around Pune by a friend of ours on the back of his motorbike. I loved it, but through her eyes.
Oh,
she did amazing stuff. She would bring home sometimes 3 kids. How she did it, I don't know. I went once with her, and we brought 2 between the 2 of us, one of whom was running a high fever, which was kind of scary, being in the middle of a flight and this kid's running a fever. But just to see how she did it, how she always had great admiration, but it was doubled by those trips.
And this was because she was working with an adoption agency.
Yeah, she was working. Lippy Roy. Wow, that's a name off my television screen.
Yes, Dr. Lippy Roy. Good morning from South Bronx.
Nice to see you.
Where she's working at a city vaccination hub. Thank you for all you do, Dr. Roy. And she's been on our show multiple times, trying to help us understand what's happening with the pandemic.
And it's great that they're in the Bronx. I totally applaud the city for going into the neighborhoods. It's the right thing to do. I'm sorry, you asked me something before that.
No, that's okay. But just go to Paula's comment here. So awesome, Lippy. I love the Bronx and appreciate your service there. And Paula is one of our great producers. So it's great to see that. And Wayne says, thanks for sharing your Maradona tale, George. That was earlier as well. You were just talking about your wife's work with an adoption agency. I know China has cracked down on adoptions and things like that. How easy or complicated is it for Americans to adopt in India? I don't know how familiar you are with the current rules.
I think they tightened up. I think they, for whatever reasons, but they didn't. They had orphanages, but it wasn't necessarily a priority. I mean, God bless them, they were taking care of a lot of children, but the chance for a family in the States to take a child in as a special one coming into a place already been investigated, it was a great thing for the children many times. But in India, they certainly do take care. And I should also say, we were in Vietnam one time, my wife and I, also to see orphanages there, from Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon to Hanoi. And we went into an orphanage, as I recall, in Hanoi, and they asked me, well, children, of course, they're in their cribs and they like to be held. So I put this little girl on my shoulder, and I could have taken her home with me. That's the way you feel when you see these children who could use homes, and to see the possibilities. In Vietnam, they were doing the best they could. We went out to some place out in the countryside. A ball player, I won't mention his name, but he had been held up trying to adopt 2 children outside Hanoi. We went out in the countryside in a little jitney bus to see these children. And while I'm there, they said, their uncle has claimed them. They will not be available for this very well-off ball player in the States to adopt them. And I had to go back and see him in spring training a couple of weeks later and tell him that I had just learned this. This was the news. But you realize where these children come from and what the possibilities are to come to the United States. My wife in the Philippines one time, she was trying to explain to them about how it worked over in the States. That people just don't understand that these families are serious about wanting children to come in and be a full part of the family.
MuckRack is pointing out that Jeremy Cooney, that's his name, was adopted in India and is now a state senator from the Syracuse area. So he's got a wonderful Irish name, but he looks like me and is a state senator. So that's a pretty awesome story.
That's our country. Thank you.
Yeah, and Diana, who is up early in California, former guest on this show. You brought 14 children for adoption from India. That's truly amazing. Thank you for all you and your wife do.
Well, it was my wife who did it. She's the stork. I was just the baggage carrier on one trip, so I get no credit for it.
So now people are talking about Lippy Roy since you brought her up. So let's see. Ron Thomas says, yes, she's awesome with her dedication and positivity. And Sunny Slaughter says, we love Dr. Roy. She's amazing. So I hope she got to hear all of that. And lots more comments coming in here. And Laura says, and yes, George has an Indian granddaughter. And here's her full name. Maybe we'll let you read out the full name. Anjali's full name is on the screen here now.
Yeah, that's her. She is a real cutie. She's got a nice job working in town, taking care of handling animals, and doing what she does best, living on her own. So we're very proud of her.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about the paper. I'm just going to bring the newspaper back in. We have about 30 minutes with George Vecsey, folks. If you have questions or comments, please jump in. I'm an aficionado of the obits section. Would love to hear your experience with writing obits.
Oh, I love the obits section. I marked that down that I want to talk about that today. There's been such a run of athletes dying, baseball players and others in the last few months. And my friend Richard Goldstein has been writing about them, but so many more. I mean, it's been a great section for decades, since Alden Whitman was the pioneer in that. And now Bob McFadden has made a career, Pulitzer level career of writing obits. But there's so many people, my friends, Rich Goldstein and Rich Sandomir, both writing a lot of sports things. and day by day, you learn the lives of them. I mean, people, and you're allowed to write in them. So I've written a few, and they sit around for a long time. In fact, I've written one. The guy actually knew I was working. He kind of sussed out what I was doing, and he cooperated greatly. But that one's and I hope I never do see it. I hope it doesn't get printed for years. But it's such an avenue for good writing when the facts are there, but to present it in a novelistic way, in a storytelling way.
Sure. I'm just looking here. This is for your family because I know you said there are Patrick Mahomes fans here. So here's a nice photo of Patrick Mahomes, and a quote from the competing side. Once the play breaks down, he finds a way to make the play happen again. And that's the quote from Levante David about Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he's straight up. He's a quarterback that can move around. It's fun to watch.
And Janet's
my sister Janet on there. Hi, Jane.
So proud of my big brother. Such an interesting show. Thank you for watching, folks. We do this every Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time, and it's available live, or you can watch it on the recording on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or LinkedIn. So thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, that's the end of the sports section. So George, we only have about half an hour with you, so we'll let you pick where you'd like to go next. Which section would you like to look at next?
Well, the Sunday paper is, of course, a weekend obsession. You have to start early just to get a little grip on it. So living out here in the suburbs, Mike Connors and his people at the plant get the blue bag in our driveway on Saturday morning, and half of the big bulge in the blue bag is the Sunday paper, the advanced section. So I read a lot of that. Love the Metropolitan section, which is where I saw the photo by my friend a little while ago. Saw that yesterday. So I spent an hour yesterday morning just digesting that. The book review section and the magazine section, other things that are there. Belafonte's Metropolitan section column. And I'm a New Yorker. I'm a native, as you probably can tell. Mm-hmm. And I miss the New York presence in the daily paper as the Times became a national and international paper. So even a taste of that one column on Sunday, just to get a feel of what people are seeing and thinking in the city.
Oh, that's great. I see our friend Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar is watching. I'm just going to put her comment up. Got my Emmitt Smith number 22 jersey on, getting ready for the Super Bowl in the evening. But earlier at 11 a.m. Eastern, everyone, please join us as this surgeon, Dr. Sujana, and her friend, another surgeon, Dr. Marina Kurian, both host She's on Call. And they have a very important show today. And they're calling it Sunday Morning Quarterback. Dr. Ian McNeil, who's a neurosurgeon and spine fellow, and Dr. Robin West, a head physician of the Washington football team and the Nationals, will be our guests on this show. I'm honored to be part of the production team. 11 a.m. Eastern on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Just search for She's on Call, and you'll get a chance to meet these two awesome doctors and their two awesome friends. So what an unusual show today, and it works great as a complement to the episode with George Vecsey. So Sujana, good luck with your show. We'll see you in a little bit, in about 90 minutes, 11 a.m. Eastern for She's on Call. So George, you're going to get to pick where you'd like to go next. And Mike says, thanks, George, from your friends and team in Northwest Queens.
Mike's a good man. He's running. He and his boss Nick run it with Deirdre as the real boss of the place. And he's saying up Cork. That's the part of Ireland his family is from, as well as Deirdre Degnan. And so there's quite a strong Irish presence, and they make sure the paper gets out on time, or else.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still think it's a miracle that every morning before 5 a.m. I get the paper here during the pandemic and everything else. It's really special that they're able to do that. Gene Palumbo, George, could you tell us a bit about your earlier, that is pre-sports columnist incarnation as the Times religion correspondent? Specifically, you're meeting the Salvadoran archbishop who was later assassinated. And please tell us about Gene as well.
Okay, Gene is a time stringer in Salvador. He's an American, grew up in the metropolitan area. I met him in 1979. We were both covering Pope John Paul II's first trip outside to Mexico, and we met there. And then there was a convention, and the Pope made a rather controversial speech in the Zocalo in Mexico City, telling all the clerics of Latin America to get back in uniform. In effect, go back and do the thing you're supposed to do, which is, I guess, be a priest or a nun, as opposed to the liberation theology. Everybody, it was coded, but that's what happened. And some people thought that put people in jeopardy, particularly Archbishop Romero in Salvador, who was already being threatened for his involvement in the actualization of liberation theology. And I got through Alan Riding, the great correspondent who knew Mexico and I met Archbishop Romero twice, including after the Pope's speech, where I asked him, do you think, in my really poor Spanish, I said, do you think that this has put you in jeopardy? And his answer, asking somebody if he thinks he's going to get knocked off, you don't ask that question too often in sports, but his answer was, yeah, he thought that put what they were doing in somewhat jeopardy. And he was assassinated about a year later, so celebrating Mass back in Salvador. So Gene and I have stayed in touch. I've gotten to see him and his lovely wife Guadalupe when they came to New York a couple of times, and we're in touch almost every day. So that was my experience with religion and Latin American politics.
Great to hear that story, and you've seen so much of the world. It's really fascinating. Let's look at the New York Times book review. At Home in the World, My Year Abroad, Chang-Rae Lee's book is being reviewed by Alexander Chi. As we flip through this, please jump in at any point to make a comment, especially if you've read any of these books or know any of the folks here. Bedell Saget says, what a gentleman, learned so much working with and reading his work over the years. So please say hi.
He's my friend. He is one of the great travelers, and when he would go overseas with us to Olympics, he was always popping in from places he'd been outside the bubble. He'd come back from shopping and knew his way around. He's a great colleague and friend.
Thank you. And look at the cooking section of the New York Times. We saw that the Times recently crossed 7.5 million total subscriptions, including things like cooking. I know their goal is to reach 10 million subscriptions by 2025, I believe, maybe. What do you make of, when you see all of these print sections? And we talked a little bit about it already, but I know the former CEO had predicted that the print edition would be disappearing in a couple of years, but it seems to be still going strong.
Well, it's the daily miracle, but it's also the financial vision. The Sulzbergers are so committed. I consider myself so lucky to have worked for a family that was committed to journalism and to that product. It comes in from generation. I met, Punch was around, and then Arthur Jr. Arthur, and they really meant it. That they didn't want to just give up on it. I mean, maybe sound economic advice is to go with the flow. Other papers have disappeared or gone to twice a week publication or something, but they were committed to it. And the fact that so many people still want, I'm an old guy, so maybe it's a dying breed, but it seems to me that the New York Times is continuing, and that the strength of it on the web also makes it important for a lot of people to have it in their hand, either commuting or at their breakfast table or sitting and having a bagel in the local cafeteria or whatever, that they want to read the paper in print as well as online. And I will say, as much as I love the web, and I use it all the time, morning, noon, and night, I'm on looking at the stories, following them through, that there's something about holding the paper and being able to focus on it and not have not have other things interfere. But the paper will go for a while yet. I am told, and I don't know if this is this is what I hear from that the Times is always 10 years ahead in its planning and what they're doing for print. Printing presses and space and all of that. The New York Times also prints other newspapers at its plant. And I know you went over this with Mike when you had him on, but they print, I think, 3 other papers at their plant. So they have found a way to make money off this. So God bless them for still putting that paper in my driveway every morning.
Thank you. Here is Death Blow, Why Capital Punishment is in America is on its way out. That's good news.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, of course, we saw the horrors of the Trump administration rushing through to execute, I think, 13 people. The rise, let the Lord sort them. The Rise and Fall of the Death Penalty by Maurice Chama, and it's reviewed by Anand Girdhar-Das, who is the terrific author and
he's a great writer.
Yeah, he's great. Former New York Times writer and correspondent based out of India. So many books here. Soul City, Race, Equality, and the Lost Dream of an American Utopia by Thomas Healy.
I just didn't know that story. It's an amazing story.
Oh, this particular one?
Yes, Soul City. I mean, somehow I knew McKissick's name, but I just never knew that he had actually gotten, X million dollars to try and build a city off in the backwoods of North Carolina. Of course, it failed, but it's a fascinating story. Just didn't know it.
Mark Lee, who's watching from Durham, I'm sure knows the story of Floyd McKissick and the idea of Soul City. Lots more comments coming in, and we're going to go to some questions for George in just a minute. I just wanted to go through the bestseller list and see if you've read any of these books or know anything about them. The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, Before She Disappeared by Lisa Gardner, The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I've not read any of those. And then nonfiction, #1 book is by Barack Obama, A Promised Land. #2, Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And On Tyranny by Timothy Snyder. Interesting list of books here. And we want to go to this section, America's Mothers Are in Crisis. Is anyone listening to them? Multiple stories put together in a special section. And Mark says Soul City is an amazing story. So thank you for that. And Ron Thomas says print is the beat for the Times. I agree. And Sudha, Neil's mom, says, Sri, can we bring George's dear wife on the show sometime, who has done remarkable work for the adoption of children? So she's always welcome to join us. And just more questions and comments coming in here. Let's just, what book is George's personal favorite of his own publication? So if people have time to read one of your books, which one should they be picking up?
Oh gosh, it's like parents say about children. I love them all equally, but they had their own strengths and weaknesses. If I had to pick one for reaching other people, for doing some good, let's make that a qualification, I would say the book I did with my friend Bob Wells, the baseball player, telling his story about how he got sober after he really cracked up at 23. I mean, already having blackouts and so on, and how he went through a treatment center. I went to the treatment center where Bob had gone after he was done. I spent a week of family. Not that was really a problem for me, but I learned a lot about myself and about addiction. And I have remained an advocate for rehab. When people talk about recovered alcoholics, and I dare say it even slips into the Times once in a while. Somebody's described as a recovered alcoholic. All I know is what I learned from the counselor when I was there for a week. There ain't no recovered. It's daily recovering, day by day. And I share this with friends. A lot of my friends are recovering day by day from one thing or another. And I would say that for anybody that wear alcohol, particularly for males, for macho guys who are drinking too much and doing crazy things, to read what Bob went through. He passed way too soon from other things, but he really was a witness to addiction. So I would put that first. But I wouldn't. All the books I've done, just about all of them, I've really loved. I put myself in. Loretta's book, Martina's book, Barbara Mandrell. Felt like she was another sister of mine in working with her. Just grand people.
And you wrote about Stan Musial. Right. I mean, what a great legendary baseball player. Can you tell us about Naked Came the Stranger, where you wrote one chapter in this very unusual book?
Who told you about that? trying to live it down. When I was at Newsday, Mike McGrady and Harvey Aronson, two dear friends of mine and talented people, decided to come up with a book to rival some of the dirty books that were making a ton of money. And we would all everybody would write a different chapter, and they set the ground rules for it. What the woman was like, the seducer was like, what she looked like, so we all chimed in with our chapters. Because I took typing in junior high school, I was able to type mine in half an hour, and I stuck it in somebody's mailbox at Newsday. And a couple of years later, the book came out, and they'd actually used mine as the cleanest chapter in the book. Because what do I know? But it was a lot of fun, and some people actually thought it was good writing, and wrote serious reviews of it. And we were laughing, and Mike and Harvey shared the royalties and the praise. It was just a wonderful ride.
And you wrote a book called Joy in Mudville, being a complete account of the unparalleled history of the New York Mets. This was the year after they won it all.
While you discuss that, I want to make sure the Yankee jersey is visible, George.
Oh, yeah. Oh, do that. It's the symbol, the emblem of my sad youth, being tortured by the Yankees year after year. I was around the Mets. I saw them go from '62, that wonderful, crazy year when they were playing in the Polo Grounds with Casey Stengel, and then Gil Hodges came in with actually had some ball players to work with, and to watch them win, totally surprising in '69. I could say it's a labor of love, because I couldn't hide it. I loved the Mets from the moment they were conceived, so to speak. And to see them go through so many bad years and crazy times, and to write about them, I really had fun doing it.
And you wrote several stories, at least two, if I'm not mistaken, for the special edition last year, or 2019 rather, in terms of the anniversary of the Miracle Mets, the 1969 series. This is your piece about Gil Hodges and Tom Seaver. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. The special section was coming out, and Jay Schreiber, who was an assistant deputy sports center assistant, was a big baseball guy. So he called me back out of limbo land and said, "Could you write something on the two of them, because they were the backbone of that team, that '69 team." And it dawned on me that in my old age, I have become much more an active admirer of the military, of even in the last 4 years, of the discipline and stability that the military leads. So in writing about Seaver and Hodges, the one thing that is clear, which I didn't understand, or given Vietnam going on in '69, I didn't want to think about it, but both Hodges and Seaver were Marines. Hodges served in I want to say Okinawa, Iwo Jima. That he was actually in X number of days after the first landing. He was in there for a number of weeks or months in fighting where it was around him, and he had this steel inside him. He wasn't going around semper fi every 5 minutes, but that's who he was, and you knew that he not only was a big strong man, but that he had been through rumors of being in war. And Seaver, who, while he didn't serve on active duty in the Marines, he joined in college, and he had that training, summer camps and all of that. And the two of them, I don't think they sat around, talking about their Marine mentality. But if you would go to Seaver and say, "Hey, well, your Mets, you're finally getting to be a good team," and he would just chill you with that look, the same way Hodges would. that you don't make jokes about the team you're working for or playing for. And so I made that the theme of my story. And Hodges was not around. Poor Seaver was already fading, and he was not going to be available to talk about it. But there were enough clips around and friends who could talk about him and Hodges, who knew them and played for them, that I relied on them.
Tom Terrific, of course, passed away last year.
Yeah.
Another one of those many sports deaths that you mentioned earlier. I do want to, before we go, and I want to make sure that we get to this special section that on the impact of the pandemic on women. You've also written a number of children's books, and which is really, really great. And Mark Lee makes a reference to that as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, they were fun to do, and it's nonfiction. I've never written fiction, have no talent for it, but I've enjoyed writing the kids' books and trying to think, not dumb it down at all, but think more 8 to 12 and think what I was, or 9 to 15 or whatever the young adult thing. But I want to say, while you're on that subject of that section, how different the New York Times is today. The awareness of people's lives, how they live, what their problems are, particularly during the pandemic, but not just, in that there are people at home, more likely women, suffering more, putting out more effort, and being disrupted more than the men. And when I see a section like that, page after page of testimony and good reporters and amazing photos. I mean, that these women, in addition to everything else, would be willing to have a Times photographer come into their lives and take photos of what life looks like in their eyes, in their faces, in their body language, that what they're going through. I mean, we're, my wife and I are sitting here in our house and comfortable and all that, but people who do have younger children and are being disrupted. I mean, my son, who by the way is an editor at the New York Times on the print section, David, he's editing the paper in the evening at home with 2 screens, as I understand it, and his wife Joelle, who's an assistant principal at a high school in Queens, a city high school. They're both working out of the house, and for a while they've had their 2 daughters around. Now it's a little bit quieter, but nevertheless, people working at home, how different their lives are. But for these women with little ones, I mean, one of the signs of the culture of it, I mean, I'm going off a little bit, was the ads you see these days of people trying to work at home and their kids throwing paint or spilling stuff or doing all kinds of crazy things. But it's a reality. And when I tend to dismiss it and say, well, you should have more control over your kids, what the testimony in that section is that's not true. That try being home with, even as my 3 kids were perfect, try being home with them during the pandemic for a while. It might have been a little touchy too.
Here are some of these statistics about, look at this, 156,000 jobs lost by women just in December. 66% of Black parents with children under the age of 18 living at home who say they've experienced a disruption in employment or income during the pandemic. And 4.6 million women have lost jobs compared to 3.8 million men. So we're seeing that. By the way, my mom's watching from Kerala in India. Hi, Amma, love you. Thank you for watching. Always wonderful to have you with us. Know your rights as a working parent. And will Biden's stimulus plan help? This is still to be seen. 8 places that get it right. They're talking about countries where they do a better job than America. And then an important article, how to fix what's broken. Diana says, I love the article about women during COVID. The photos are wonderful. I was forced to take a leave of absence from my job to become a teacher at home to support 2 small children's distance learning. I feel for so many. Thank you, Diana, for sharing that and for all you are doing. Patricia says, that's what's awesome about the New York Times Magazine behind the scenes. It gives you such a rich feeling of the efforts of the journalism and the people covered. And this is a link to the New York Times events, and that's another way in which the Times makes money. There are also the tours and the trips and all of that. I did see an important question here from Nikhil Hati Singh, who says, I'd like to hear more about writing memoirs. How do you decide which projects to take on, and how would you compare the writing process to the work you did at the Times? Nikhil's a terrific journalist himself.
Thank you for the question. I would say it's left hand, right hand, or left brain, right brain, and I'm just blessed that I was able to do the two things at once. I never went out and looked at it. Once or twice I actually put out a feeler through my agent or something about somebody who might have an interesting story to tell. I like writing, ghostwriter, working with other people. My life is what it is. I get it out there in other ways, but to write about people who have stories to tell that are worth, and in every case, people came to me. I mean, I don't think any of these books were stirred up by me. I did actually 6 in all. And mostly it was just somebody, an agent, an editor coming to me, making an offer, talk to people to see. I've turned down a few, quite popular, Kareem, I was online to do a book Kareem, but I was already committed to do Bob Welch's book, and I just couldn't drop that project. And Peter Nobler wound up doing that book and did a wonderful job, whether I could have or not. But that's the point, is that there's so many people out there that you would like to do a book with, and you just want them to talk and to be comfortable with you, not spar with you. I would talk with one business guy, and he was sparring with me because he's a businessman. And I said, well, I'm not going to have any fun asking this guy questions. I won't be able to direct him in a way to talk. So I did. But the people I worked with, I mean, were just, after a while, Martina with the handkerchief, or Loretta Lynn just sitting in her hotel room on the road telling stories. It was amazing. There were novels. They were telling me novels, and I was just transcribing them and kind of clipping their anecdotes together. It was fun, and it was, how can I say, it was easy.
Just look at this. So proud, so very proud of my brother, George Vecsey. In addition to our parents influencing his ability to write, the public schools in Hollis and Jamaica, Queens also encouraged George to write.
Oh, Liz, that's so sweet. Liz, I have to tell you, I'm the oldest of 5. Then there's Liz, and then Pete, the very famous basketball columnist from the New York Post for so many years, still active. And then Jane, who was active in a private school also with Liz and other places. And then my brother Chris, who's a professor at Colgate University. So yeah, we all came along together. We all had the same kindergarten teacher in Hollis, Queens. The only teacher we had in unison. She inspired Liz to become a teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and then became a principal after that, or a headmaster. That's my parents with me, the firstborn. These two radical lefty journalists from the 30s who went on strike at the Long Island Press and never got in the building again, and then along came me. So my mom was busy with the family after that, and that's my dad saying, What do we do now?
Love the photograph.
So what you do now is you go to work eight days a week.
Yeah, no, great photograph, and I love that you have it. Your hairstyle hasn't changed.
Yeah, thank you.
I can say that. Look at me. You have more hair than I do. Let's just so great to hear the stories of your family, and we love hearing about that. Debbie asks, which high school did your family go to?
Well, my father had to leave high school. He was so smart. He knew so much, but he had to leave high school to earn a living, to support his mom. So my mother went to Jamaica High School in Queens. She was in the first class to go into this beautiful building on the hill. And then she went to College of New Rochelle. Both of her schools, Jamaica and New Rochelle, are now closed down as entities. Jamaica High School still exists, this beautiful building built to last forever. But the geniuses who run New York City public schools, they couldn't run a school for minority kids. So they did the best thing they could think of, which was to shut down a school with all that tradition in it, and so many people wishing well. And they have other schools in there, and I hope they're doing a good job. I'm sure they are. But nevertheless, the entity of Jamaica High School, the city just said, who needs it? A school that gave Letty Cotton, Sid Davidoff, Herb London, when I was there, Bob Beeman, just all kinds of people from different, to a member of Congress right now. I'm blanking from Jamaica High School, and also Jelani Cobb, the writer, for the New Yorker. And so there's Jamaica High School. And I have great loyalty to it, even though the city didn't think it was worth keeping.
So, and Debbie says for us, Francis Lewis near Hollis was the school that she went to. And Bob Beeman, the world record holder, was a few years behind you at the high school, right?
Yeah, he played basketball there. I've met him since. I mean, the school has had a number of people to be proud of. Francis Coppola was there for a year, and then he transferred out to another place. And I caught up with him later at Hofstra when I got to meet him, and we're still in touch. But Jamaica was just a great place to go to school. And what Liz was referring to back there is Jamaica taking, or Liz said that, of Jamaica taking good care of me. I was sort of on the scrap heap. I had flunked out of honors classes and was in a regular class, which was fine. And Mrs. Rhodes, my English teacher. So for all the teachers out there, when you find somebody who's underproducing, underachieving, there are ways. And she let me read my stories out loud in class, and I would read a book review or something I wrote because she knew that I could write. And I looked up one day and I saw a girl 3 rows over, and she's smiling. And I said, "What? You write," and the girl smiles at you. And I wound up taking her to the senior prom with the help of my friend Jean, but that's another story. And it just was an example that a good teacher took me out of my shell, got me to produce.
Salute to all teachers, especially now with all the controversy about vaccinations and online learning, remote learning, all of that. We talk about mothers having it so hard. Certainly teachers are also, it's very complicated for them. We just have a few minutes left. Carla asked a great question. Some advice, please, for young journalists.
My advice for young people wanting to be journalists is diversify in college. Make sure you take an economics course, a pre-law course, a language course, a math course, because you're going to need all those skills in a field that is not the same as it was when I came into it. If you could write a little bit, ask a few questions, you could probably get a job somewhere. Nowadays, it's not that hard. The qualifications of people at the Times are so high now. They're so good at what they do. They've studied for it. But make sure you get a more broad education, because you might find out that you can do other things also. The jobs aren't there that used to be. I don't want to be gloomy about it, but it's a fact. I mean, in my family alone, Laura was a great sports columnist at several papers, and then she was a political columnist in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, taking on some of the characters in that part of the world. As one former governor said when I ran into him a couple of years later, "I miss your daughter." That's the kind of reporter she was, but the jobs just aren't there. That paper is now coming out twice a week.
Well, thank you. We have just a few minutes left. I know Neil wants to play a particular piece of audio.
Yeah, Shri, thank you. I want to, even though we've moved on a little bit, the Primal Scream, George, you actually had a lot of great comments about that. One of the things about the New York Times, they've done such a great job with print, but multimedia, they've actually really enhanced what they're doing online. So I wanted to share the audio from this piece.
So let's explain what this is. The background of it was this is part of this coverage, and they had a phone line where people could call in and leave a message.
They started this earlier in the pandemic. They opened up a phone line and encouraged working moms to call in just to express their emotions and what they were going through. And that's really was the basis for the special section that Shri showed earlier. And they had staff pour through the messages. They went through the data. They put that really great section together. So I just wanted to show this real quick. Let people listen.
Welcome to the New York Times Primal Scream Line, where the floor is yours to yell, laugh, cry, or vent for a solid minute.
I just wanted to say,
I'm so sick of my goddamn kids.
This pandemic has made me realize that maybe I'm not cut out to be a mother.
I am doing my 6th load of laundry today.
Oh, God, every day I think I can't do this again. But then I do. I get it. I get up and I do it because that's just what parents do, right?
Wow. This is just, it's one thing to read these comments, George, but it's another to hear them. And a heart goes out to all mothers
really.
who are dealing with such great difficulty.
But think of how the newspaper has retooled to be able to use that visual ability. It's not your grandfather's New York Times anymore. They recognize that there are people out there in the world living those lives.
Yeah, it's just really special. I just want to see some more quick comments before we let you go. Ina says, I'll never forget your comment about writing on sports and religion. Not so different. They both happen on Sunday.
Ina, thank you. Gracias.
Jonathan Borstein says, delightful show. Thank you. And Mark says, what are some of your favorite books in the shelves behind you, George? And once again, for people who missed it, tell us what that poster is, please.
Oh, I got these in from TV people who were on TV all the time. Oh, I don't know. There's some favorites up there. Autograph books. I could wander over here for a minute. My books, but also Ulysses, books about my family, my mother being a journalist, Thomas Wolfe, who I read when I was a kid. Signed books by some people. Kofi Awunor, famous poet, was killed. Anyway, they're.
What are the posters? Let's talk about the big poster with the Nashville in it and the other things that we see there.
That's the coal miner's daughter in Italian. Le voleva agnello nuziale. She wanted a wedding ring. He gave her a guitar. Their lives were never the same. And that's that. And my name is in there somewhere as having written the book. Let's see. The poster over.
Yeah. There you go.
The thing over there. That's my wife's. One of the travel posters that she did. Which one is that? Well, that would be Moscow. We were there in 1986. She's an artist. I am late in getting to mention that, but her travel pictures have now been our son in his spare time, and people are turning them into postcards and greeting cards and reproduce amazingly. So she's presented in my room. Tracy Stengel and his wife Edna when he broke his hip in 1965, and he signed it for me. A cross and a little banner that was given to me by a friend in Mexico, journalist friend of mine, Berta, and Stan Musial book, a collage of family things. Me on a bridge in I don't know if that shows up. Me on a swinging bridge in Appalachia, taken by a great photographer from the Times in Murray. So it's sort of my life in journalism in 3 or 4 different pictures.
Sure. Here's Tom Jolly, print editor of the New York Times, who's been a guest multiple times on the show, and he had us over at his home in New Jersey to read the paper and eat bagels with Carla Baranauckas. Says, such a great show. I always get a kick out of the modest way George tells these wonderful stories.
Tom is such a good boss.
Yeah.
I've never quite gotten over how grumpy I was about the web. Tom would be saying to me, in a year or two, you'll understand a little bit more about it and you'll be doing this and that. I said, no, it's a pain in the neck. Why can't we just have the paper? And he humored me. And about a year later, he and a couple of other people in the department were teaching me how to put in links and, send off messages and all that. But Tom, I apologize, man.
And George, your son works for Tom, right?
Yeah.
Dave?
Tom, and Dave says he's a terrific boss. Dave talks about him a lot. And I get Tom's, I'm happy to be on the Jolly Grams about, I'm sure you're putting one out today, Tom, on the snowstorm. You guys are going to have to get the paper done faster because we got to get the trucks rolling earlier. And he says it in such a nice way.
He has to wait for the results of the Super Bowl if he can.
If they can get it in there.
Yeah. Let's see some other comments coming in. Dr. Chandrasekhar, whose show it will start at 11 a.m. Eastern. She's on call. It's so hard to be a parent and so much harder this year. Sunny saying that was powerful about that audio clip. Women do an extraordinary amount of unpaid labor, says Laura Silverman, another great guest on the show. Linda says, thanks for another great show. Stay safe. And what a great way to kick off Super Bowl Sunday. Pun intended, says Patricia. And Sunny says, this was an amazing segment. Mr. Vecsey has lived his best life and contributed so much. I'm grateful this morning to be present for this show. Thank you so much. Debbie says, did you know Laurie Mifflin, first female sports editor at the New York Times in the 70s, first co-ed class at Yale, field hockey captain there?
Sure, I know Laurie. She's one of my best friends. I have watched a lot of soccer games with her and her husband, Duncan, and she's terrific. Yeah, she was the deputy sports editor who would, pat me on the head and tell me to behave myself and not make so much noise and bother Joe Vecchione, the sports editor. She's terrific. No, she was in that book that was written about the first class of women at Yale. And by the way, the representative from Jamaica High School that I talked about now from Houston is Sheila Jackson Lee. And she was in that first, I think she was a transfer, but she was in that first group of women going to Yale when Laurie was there, as was Skip Gates.
Oh, wow. What a class, what a
yeah, school. And others. I believe Janet Yellen was in there at that time, if I'm not totally hallucinating about that. But yeah, I mean, Laurie was, they went out and got the best and the brightest and did a great job doing it.
Yeah, Miriam says, yes, a great show. Sports writers are much more than sports writers, as witnessed by this appearance of George Vecsey. So thank you for that. I did want to just share with the audience one quick thing. This is an article you wrote about Indian sports in 2004, and you were kind enough to quote my wife, Rupa, who used to be a world-class sports rifle shooter. She's in India Sports Hall of Fame. And she used the word gobsmacked. And so you got that into the Times. It's not often in the paper. It's there occasionally. I've checked. But this was really nice. And she was proud to be interviewed by you for this story back in 2004. Well, the sad part about Indian sports, as you know, is that there are 1 billion people, but apart from cricket and some decent tennis players, it has the worst per capita record in Olympic history. Only 8 gold medals, all in men's field hockey, none since 1980. This was in 2004. That has changed a little bit in shooting and some other sports, but really so much more to be done. And in fact, Rupa now is on the board of an organization called Olympic Gold Quest that's trying to make sure that there are more opportunities for Indian athletes to get sports medals at the Olympics and elsewhere. So going beyond cricket and tennis.
I remember the quote. I remember talking to your wife.
Yeah.
I was very impressed. I mean, she was a star in what, 3 different Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, she really enjoyed doing the sports stuff, but being a Rhodes Scholar was partly because of her sports, and so she was always grateful for that. Here's Debbie says that 2 of the people you spoke about were both her classmates. Sudha Parekh says, great show earlier. I thought it'd be only about sports. I'm not a sports fan, but this is a multifaceted show. So everyone, please tag a friend, hit share on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, any of those platforms. As soon as we're off the air, it'll restart and people can watch. And Ron says it always is learning journey every Sunday, and Ron is a former guest on the show, a New York City area gentleman who now lives in Dubai and joins us every week. So with that, Neil, anything else before we let George go and say thank you to everybody?
No, I just want to thank George again for joining us and all the time. That I want people to know that George didn't just show up Sunday morning. I mean, we spent a lot of time together on the phone, talking about the show, planning what we would cover. And then he wrote this great blog post that I encourage everyone to take a look at about the Super Bowl and use the opportunity to promote the show as well. So really, George, hats off. Thank you very much for all of your support for the show. This is what he put on his website to promote the show, using the graphic and then talking about Amanda Gorman, the links to the show, Pat Mahomes, etc. So, George, hat tip to you. I'll even take my.
You can lose the uniform now, man.
Had to, I bring it out. I mean, we had Claire Smith on the show. Certainly had to wear my Yankee jersey for her. Bill Roden as well earlier in the year. But again, thank you so much. Want to make sure folks know. In terms of our upcoming shows, next week, for Valentine's Day, Daniel Jones is going to be joining us, the editor of the Modern Love podcast, column, and TV show. And we'll be talking, when we talk about him, about the TV show, many of the scenes were shot in my hometown of Hastings on Hudson, New York. So that'll be exciting. And then, of course, after that, after Valentine's Day, we also have two other great guests, Elizabeth Becker, former New York Times reporter and author of You Don't Belong Here, Three Women Rewrote the Story of War. And Ron Lieber will join us February 28th. He's the New York Times Your Money columnist and author of The Price You Pay for College. So we have a great lineup coming up. And again, right after this show, you'll be able to watch She's on Call, hosted by Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. Oops, sorry about that. This is the card for the 11 o'clock show. Sunday morning quarterback, they're calling it, with Dr. Ian McNeil and Dr. Robin West. Dr. West is the head physician for the Washington football team and the Washington Nationals, and it'll be live at 11 a.m. In just about 40 minutes. So with that, again, George, thank you very much. And if you have any parting thoughts or anything you'd like to share before we go.
No, I'm now a fan. I will alter my week, and knowing that I can get your show when it's there, I will spend more time watching it. It's great. Thank you.
That is so.
And I'm impressed by the number of people that you were able to get. Really nice to see all those names up there. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we have a great relationship. And Mike is asking about the second inning with George. He's looking for, I guess, the extended cut of the.
I'll do it at the plant as soon as it's possible.
That would be great. And you know what? I actually haven't been to the plant myself. I was so jealous when Sri got to go about 2 years ago. So when all of this ends and we can travel, I know Mike promised he'd give me a tour as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Mark called the show a home run. Touchdown might be more apropos for today, but either way, a great show. And George, as my mom said earlier, it wasn't just a sports show. I mean, talking about your books, talking about your work, your wife's work in India, it really was just tremendous. So, and Naomi says, what a pleasure listening to this legend. And I agree. Again, growing up in New York, getting the New York Times every day, for time reference, really, it was the 80s when I graduated in 91 from high school and went off to college. But reading your column, seeing your byline is something I grew up with. And what an absolute honor and privilege to have you on the show.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Everyone, we'll see you next week. And have a great week and good luck. Enjoy the game today. Bye-bye.